Our next speaker is Leah Kaplan. Let's welcome her.
Hi, everyone. So this really feeds off of this conversation really well. I'm from Arizona State University, and I'm going to share about a method called public technology assessment, and specifically our work conducting public forums about automated vehicle systems. So Arizona State University and University of Maryland are part of a network called Ecast, which stands for Expert and Citizen Assessment of Science and Technology. It's a distributed network of nonpartisan think tanks, universities, and science museum that works to bring in public values into discussions about science and technology issues. Why? Well, scientists and engineers are experts in a lot of things. The real experts when it comes to public values are, in fact, members of the public, and these are the voices that are most often left out of these conversations. So we try to bring them in as an additional input to these critical discussions. We've done work on a lot of different issues, working with federal agencies, and this specific project, like I said, is about AVs. We use a method called Participatory Technology Assessment. We bring together between 80 and 100 people into a room for day-long discussions. The people are diverse, representing the diversity of the communities where these forums are held. These are designed as informed public deliberations, so we do brief participants on the technology and how it works, the issue at hand, ahead of the forum, so we can have really rich discussions. And then we use different methods co-developed with science museums to make these really interactive, engaging events. We collect data in a number of different ways. This is social science research. So throughout the day, participants are filling out worksheets, they're conducting group activities, we have table observers, and then we go in and go through and process all this data. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit of our preliminary results from these forums. We collect tons and tons of data, so this will just be a snapshot, and I'm happy to share more later on during lunch. This specific project is actually part of an international collaboration with a French organization called Mission Publique. We're hosting forums in 18 cities across 10 different countries, all looking at these questions of what are people's hopes, concerns, fears about automated mobility. Like I said, these forums are day-long activities. We focus the different sessions on different issues related to AVs. 5 out of the 6 sessions are the same across all of the forums happening across the world. Session 5 is specifically designed as a local session. So we work with local stakeholders to design a session focused specifically on local issues. We hosted 4 different forums in the US this summer, one in Boston, Massachusetts, one here at UMD representing the DMV area, one in Phoenix, Arizona, and one in Buffalo, New York. We brought together 317 participants with a lot of diversity with respect to age, education level, ethnicity, modes of transportation, to have really rich discussions. One of the ways that we can measure the impact of these activities is through pre- and post surveys. So we can see that participants' views on driverless mobility did shift in a statistically significant way just by engaging in these discussions. And this could be that they completely shifted to the opposite end of the spectrum, or it could just be that it slightly altered their views. So this pre- and post survey is one way that we can measure that. At the beginning of the forums, we also asked participants kind of their baseline, how they feel about driverless mobility. We did this by asking them for a one-word answer. We then asked this question again at the end of the day, and we're able to take all of these one-word responses and use social science methods like open coding to get kind of a sense of people's sentiment, kind of going into the forum and seeing if that changed over the course of the day. We're also looking into using machine learning as another way to process these data. It's a lot of written responses to go through. But also we see that by using machine learning, we can process this data and then also compare it to other settings. What are discussions like in Reddit forums? Is it different how people are talking during in person versus online with these discussions? At the beginning of the day, we also asked participants what their main hopes are and concerns are for these technologies. With respect to hopes, people really had a lot of hope for this technology to improve safety. That's not surprising. That's kind of the big motivating factor discussed in the expert community as well. And then also accessibility came up as a top hope for AVs. This is both respect to physical accessibility for people with disabilities and also opportunities. We heard about rural transportation. And so for people, especially in Phoenix and Buffalo, where there isn't as strong public transportation, a lot of people are hoping that this can help supplement individual typical vehicles. On the concern side, safety came up as well. People aren't fully comfortable with this technology. They aren't sure if it is actually going to be safer than human-driven vehicles, and that is a top concern of theirs. They're also concerned about negative economic impacts, job loss. But what's also notable about this method is, yeah, we can identify these kind of top two hopes and concerns, but there are a lot of other concerns that people have as well. So we think of these as weak signals that decision makers should be paying attention to as well, because it might not be a big issue right now, but if we start deploying these technologies, you might run into these problems down the line. So this can be kind of an early warning system to help some of experts and stakeholders think about some of these issues. Session 2 of the forum focused specifically on the technology. We reviewed the different levels of automation, talked about testing of vehicles, privacy, protection, cybersecurity. We can see that kind of as expected, people were less comfortable with higher levels of automation, more comfortable with lower levels of automation. Something of note is that people still felt pretty comfortable with level 3 automation. In the expert community, level 3, this mixed automation is kind of seen as the most dangerous level of automation. But it's important to see that people actually feel more comfortable still being able to keep control of the vehicle in some respect. So people aren't quite ready to give up control of that vehicle, even with the recognition that, okay, yeah, it might present additional challenges. So that's an important thing for researchers to keep in mind. One of the reasons that we host forums in multiple locations is so we can look at regional differences. We can see, for instance, that people in Boston were actually a lot more comfortable than people in Buffalo. And we can try and, at this early stage, make guesses as to why this is the case. It might be that Boston is a more tech-focused city and people are just kind of generally more comfortable with technology. We can also look at written responses to see what's motivating these quantitative results. And then, so we're also looking to host more forums in more cities so that we can have kind of multiple, all right, these are tech-focused cities, these are post-industrial cities, and see if that trend persists and if it's actually a regional characteristic or if it's just kind of a result of who was in the room that day. Like I mentioned, we have written rationales. So through our forums, we seek to not only understand what people are saying, but why they're saying that. And we get that through written rationales. So people justifying why they rated that they were highly comfortable with a level 3 car, for instance. And we can get a sense of the different themes that come up. So these provide a very rich data set for us to go through. It takes a lot longer, so we're only in the preliminary stages of going through all of these written rationales. But that's another source of data for us as well. During session 3, we started to think about the different development scenarios that AVs could take. We presented 4 different scenarios. Scenario 1 was improving the current system, so essentially saying, we don't really want more AV development. We'd rather focus on traditional infrastructure, traditional methods of, let's just have more buses or whatnot. We also had a public transportation scenario using automated public transportation systems, individual ownership, and rideshare. Participants were allowed to mix and match these different scenarios. We recognize that it doesn't have to be just one development scenario. In fact, it'll probably be a mix of all of these. But overall, we saw that participants did favor public transportation methods, kind of more generally. A lot of people saw this as something that might actually be accessible to them in the future, as opposed to an individual automated vehicle, which might be out of their price range. Session 4 then looked at governance. We talked about how technology and governance are really intertwined, and so we do want to look at these issues. We presented 6 different issues, including environment, safety, privacy protection, and then asked participants what stakeholders they trust and who they think would be effective at addressing each of these issues. So for the issue of safety, for instance, we can see that participants really trusted a lot of the different stakeholders. It's hard at this early stage to know exactly what that means. It could be that some subset of the participants really liked national government while others really liked industry, and it kind of all balanced out. It could also mean that participants really do trust all of these different governance bodies and want them to be involved, and then on the flip side of that, might hold all of these different bodies responsible if there are problems with safety of these technologies. Once again, we can get a better sense of this through written rationales. For the local session for the forum that we hosted here at University of Maryland, one of the things that we looked at was how people want to be informed about testing. We can see that participants mentioned a lot of different ways that they would like to be informed, and that is really reflective of the diversity of people that we had in the room, with all different age ranges, all different socioeconomic levels. And so this is really important for local stakeholders, local decision makers to keep in mind, that when they're going to perform a test or they're considering testing in their area, they need to be informing the members of their communities in ways that will be accessible to all members of the community. And so that is another way that we can partner with local stakeholders to interface with the public and bring in these different views. So that, like I said, that is just a small snapshot of all of the data that we collected during these forums. We're still in the preliminary results phase. We're having a meeting with local stakeholders next week to ask what questions they would like us to dive into the data to address. But at this time, I'd be happy to take your questions about anything. One question, okay, all right.
Okay, so the question is, do you try to, first of all, thanks for doing all these tests, very nice talk. Do you try to ask people where they will accept more driverless or various levels of autonomy with respect to the geography of the driving environment? Because my prediction is that in long-range driving, like if I want to go from here to New York, I would accept easier to put it on an autopilot and go to sleep. This is an old subject. It used to be called automated vehicle highway systems. And the idea is you actually create virtual cells on the highway, and you place cars there, and then they go like a train. And the only thing you have to worry about is if somebody needs to leave, or somebody is at fault, and you can take them out and bring it, so on and so forth. Have you tried to do, therefore, any studies where you try to ask these questions that you're asking, but with respect to whether you're an urban environment, a rural environment, a highway, and so on and so forth, and try to quantify the answers that way?
Yes, so during session 2, we asked about it specifically in the context of testing, where people would feel comfortable having these vehicles tested, and we did ask about highways, closed environments, urban areas, rural areas, and are able to look at those responses as well.
But do you have the results by category?
By location, yes, and by the different areas.
They were not here, right?
They're not here. That's in the. I'm happy to show it to you afterwards, but limited time to show all the results. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you have any other questions.